Good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to the Joint Elected Officials October 19th work session. I'd like to call to order the Lane County Board of Commissioners, and I'd just like to make a statement. We're working on trying to get Commissioner Lyken in via phone, but I think we're having a little trouble with the phone line. So as soon as he can, I'm sure he'll be participating.
I'm going to open the city council meeting, and likewise, I know Councilor Soretta is trying to join us by phone, but I guess she'll join us when she can actually get on the phone and do it. So that's, and I guess before this takes off, I just like to make the comment that this is the purpose of the meeting today is to really inform you about the work that's been done and to answer some questions, but deliberation meetings are set up after this for, I think, both bodies to take the information that they are hearing today and take it back to their own bodies for a deeper discussion. So that will follow. Right. Okay. Go ahead.
All right. Well, thank you, Mayor Chair. I'm Brian Craner, Capital Projects Manager with the county, and appreciate having everybody back in the room to report on our progress to date and to share some draft deliverables with you with the intent of familiarizing you with those and giving you an opportunity to review them over the next week before you guys meet in your individual bodies next week. So we'll start off with an agenda we tried to put together to get through all our information, also afford you the adequate amount of time for discussion. I'm going to start it off with a quick update on the task force work, including stakeholder engagement and the progress to date. And then I'll turn it over to Larry Gilbert with Cameron McCarthy to go through the draft deliverables that they've developed to date and review those in detail. And then we'll turn it over for discussion at 12:30. And then the public comment that we have slated for 20 minutes starting at 1:10. So we'll lead off with an update on stakeholder engagement. I've asked Devin, the public information officer with the county, to come on up and share what we've been working on.
It's been my pleasure to work with Jan Bowman over the last few weeks to continue putting the word out to our community about this process. There are a handful of strategies I'll update you on today. The first is our website is live and has been for a few weeks now. It's at downtownplanning.org, so it's a great resource for folks to get information on upcoming meetings, opportunities to provide comment and to get involved, as well as a brief survey that they can use to provide feedback to you on the values that they're looking for in this project and some of their thoughts surrounding the downtown planning effort. We've had 82 survey respondents as of last night, and I expect that number to grow as we continue to share information about the website. We've held 16 stakeholder meetings to date with groups that are ranging from our folks at the farmers market, Saturday market, and other community groups that have invested in the outcome of this project as well. We've reached out to the surrounding property owners and occupants. We did so with a mailing. We have about 229 folks we've asked to get involved because their properties adjoin the site study area. And we're hosting a meeting for them next week, and so we're hoping to see a lot of involvement from our neighbors here in the downtown area. We also held the first of 2 community open houses last night in the Atrium building. We'll be holding a second open house with an opportunity for folks to provide comment on November 2nd here in Harris Hall. And so we're hoping to see folks come out and provide comment on the work to date and again share the values they have for this process. And finally, we continue to reach out to our partners in the media to help spread the word about these opportunities to become involved, to share an update on the progress made to date, and make sure that they are able to stay involved and help us educate and communicate with our community.
Before you go forward, I just want to let you know that Councilor Soretta is on this phone. I guess I want to hear from her whether she can actually hear you. I might bring the phone down there if that's what's needed. Claire?
Down there, that's what's needed. Claire? Mayor, I actually have the TV turned on so I can follow along that way.
She's fine. Okay. And I probably should let you know that Geez, I'm talking to myself here. I should probably let you know that if you turn a page or anything, we're hearing it, just so you know. Okay.
4-second delay between.
Mayor Pearson, you're apparently accustomed to that.
All right, so there's a recap on stakeholder engagement. It's obviously been a robust effort and a large part of what we're working on. Going back to the high-level view, we shared this graphic with you at our last meeting in terms of our planned approach to the work and how we're fitting it into the deadline between now and between the start of November 14th. We had essentially 12 weeks to complete the work in, and we identified these 5 tasks broadly and the number of items to complete under each of them. And so here's the framework we're working under. Obviously, we joke that the number of weeks on the right would be larger if it wasn't for the November 14th deadline, but here's what we have to work with. So graphically, in terms of the progress we've made to date, we tried to kind of gray out, if you will, and lighten up the tasks that we feel are essentially complete to date. So the tasks through items, let me get mine out here. Tasks through items 1 through 3 are essentially complete. With item 4, we're kind of in the thick of it there. There's some refinement that needs to occur. Thank you. Some refinement that needs to occur to complete that task, and that goes back to what the mayor had alluded to in terms of some specific feedback and the direction we'll be asking for that you can discuss further at your individual meetings next week. You see a lot of dark green down below, a lot of work left to complete in the final 4 weeks, and remaining mindful of that time crunch so that we deliver the product in the sufficient detail that we know you anticipate and we expect to deliver. There's another number of meetings down below in this graphic that help highlight additional key dates that we're focusing on, including the 2 individual bodies meeting next week to help support the work of the task force and provide the direction we need to finish strong here. So with that, that's where we're at, and I'm going to turn it over to Larry to talk about where the draft deliverables are at, and he'll again highlight some points of some decision points that we're facing that we would like some direction on in the coming week. Thank you.
Thank you, Brian. Again, this is Larry Gilbert. I'm with Cameron McCarthy Landscape Architects here in Eugene. You have in your packet, you've received program summaries, and this is what we have as a compilation of those summaries in a simplified format, and we're really focusing on the building massing and the forms that the buildings will take within the study area. So there are some numbers up there that talk about parking, secured parking. We're really not looking at those right now. What we're really hoping to do is to find, we have 3 development scenarios, and there's a couple of options for each of the scenarios that we will look at today. And we want for you to be able to look at those options and make careful considerations with that using these building forms. And these building forms that we're doing with the square footage represent the amount of floors and the volume of building space that would be required to meet each of these program elements. So that 35,000 square feet, a lot of the images that we represent for City Hall are the current design for City Hall, the 4-story building with about an 8,500 square foot floor plate, 4 stories. And then 240,000 square feet for the courthouse, farmers market. We were only going to be showing the covered portion of that in these diagrams, and then we're looking at opportunities for phase 2, City Hall, and as well as the municipal court. And also in your packet, and this is a really important piece to be able to have you look at and consider, is looking at a list of prerequisites and considerations that you would use to help measure and evaluate each of the scenarios that we have developed to compare and help hopefully make your choice from the 6 options that we're going to be looking at today down to the 3 scenarios that we would be moving forward with. Once we nail down the three scenarios for this project, we will need to be able to measure in, costs, schedules, open space configurations, and coordination. But right now, today, we're really trying to find what is the best home for each of the buildings within each of the three scenarios. And you can see, if you look through that list of criteria, they're broken up into major headings, which would be the site, context, transportation, costs, and then additional work required. But this is still a work in progress, and we encourage additions if there are things that we are not considering. We are also meeting with AIA Southwest Oregon chapter, and we're going to meeting them this evening and present the same presentation to them. And we're asking them to look at these considerations and prerequisites as well to help inform us if there are things that we may have missed from the design community. And they will also be looking at these same models that we will be looking at right now and provide any insights or any kind of further direction that they might have to make sure that we have everything covered in terms of what the design community might be thinking about the development of this downtown area.
So we had two hands go up in its introductory part.
Okay.
And I know if they have anything to do with what they're going to be seeing, you're going to be showing them next, the blockings and all of that
Yes.
stuff, and they should save those questions till then. If it's something, okay, so anything different than that.
If there's something different, I'm in if we have a...
So, but briefly, everybody, because we want to move into the main,
If you open it up to one person, I think you should open it up to everybody.
of course.
Okay.
But I was asking the question about whether they want to talk, this preamble has to do with the preamble, not the actual blocking.
Right.
And then my next suggestion is if you do have something about that, let's do it really fast because we want to get into the meat of the matter. Is that okay with you, Dave?
Yes, that's great.
Okay, so I've
I
got,
thought you're just nicely asking everyone to hold off for a little bit.
well, I was trying to say, hold off unless this is something that clarifies what he said up front here. Okay, Mike.
Thank you, Mayor. Very quickly on that previous slide, actually 2 slides ago in the original that's the one. All original planning that I recall had us with 25,000 square feet for phase 1 of City Hall. When we decided to include the 4th floor, that took us just over 30. My question, how and why did we get to 35,000 square feet as the plan?
Basically, it's what you've been seeing for the last many months. It's the 3 original floors and then the 4th floor on top. So
31.8 or 32, wasn't it?
Is that correct?
So how do you want to respond to that, Mike? Come on up.
It seems considerably more to me. That's why I'm wondering why we're growing this.
The figure should be 30,000 square feet to be consistent with what we've been doing for phase 1 up to this point.
So that's just wrong? Thank you, sir.
Hey,
Commissioner Bozovich.
Thank you. So 2 quick questions. One is the program space requirements shown there, they're independent of location. That's just space requirement.
These are just program requirements, spatial requirements.
I want to make sure I was clear about that. What happened to Muni Court? There was some discussion about, it's there at the bottom. I missed it. You went by the slide so fast I missed it. Thanks. Got my 2 questions.
20,000 square feet for Muni Court.
perfect.
So, and again, we want to emphasize that this is still a work in progress, and we will refine and kind of make sure that we're very accurate in our representations of the building square footages and the placement of those. When we look at these diagrams, we're really looking at the property lines and the blocks. We're really not yet looking at building development setbacks and some other considerations. We do know that each one of these options will require some vehicle access through the site, and we will need to take some of the spatial requirements for those kinds of elements in the final plans that you would review, as well as outdoor multi-use space for plazas or activity space for the farmers market. All of those kinds of things we'll be taking into consideration. So, and again, I want to emphasize what we're looking at is not a design. We're looking at a placeholder to determine what is the best home based upon the three scenarios for the buildings that we're talking about.
Alan?
I'm interested in parking. That only has the secured parking for the people that work in the building. And what's the code requirement for all of that? And what about public parking? Building public buildings without any public parking in this concept?
Larry, do you want to speak to the conversations that you guys have had with Jeff?
We're not completely there yet. We've begun to assemble all the data that identifies all of the city-owned and county-owned both parking structures and surface parking, and including metered and signed parking on the streets within a quarter mile of this site area. We do know that some of the facilities there will be an opportunity, and in fact we're even directed in terms of looking at the NCSC study that there would be secured underground parking, say for the courthouse. Now, depending upon the size of the footprint of the courthouse, that could be one level that could increase the parking up to more than 100 plus spaces as opposed to the 70. What we're identifying here is what the NCSC studied in terms of the courthouse parking, and in addition, the sheriff parking as well, the sheriff staff parking as well. We aren't looking at as yet at public parking. We know that we're in a park-free or a non-restricted zone here in terms of parking. There aren't any parking requirements within the confines of the study area. But we will be bringing back, and as included in this report, opportunities to expand or find where other parking possibilities might be within the context. Once we really know the three scenarios that all the electeds have determined, we can really hone in on the parking component and be able to address that in a more thorough way.
And we're going to do that before we...
Absolutely. This is the parking, scheduling, costs, phasing, all of those things are going to be considered.
And the notes say 20 spaces at, for instance, for City Hall, 20 spaces at 350 square feet. Is that one space for every 350 square feet of,
yes,
of office space?
Well, no, it's for parking space. That's how much space would be required for a parking space, including drive aisles. So
we're in the downtown area doesn't have parking requirements for buildings, correct?
Correct.
So there's no requirement that we build parking, but needs to be considered and thought of, especially the butterfly lot going away as a parking lot.
Absolutely, because the butterfly lot accommodates 228 spaces for public service in the court as right now. And then there's the North Umpqua parking lot as well. But there's opportunities to expand that parking lot in the future, but those have costs and scheduling implications as well. So we really need to kind of nail down the scenarios and then be able to dive into what are the impacts and where do we see the opportunities and constraints for where parking might occur.
And it'll all be apples to apples, so
absolutely
area will have the same amount.
Everything is the same.
And then in the next slide, includes the following general categories. So costs will be, and additional work required will be part of the package when we come back.
Absolutely. And we have Ryder Levitt Bucknell, which is an international firm. It's really high-level costs, though. It's kind of square footages, but it's not only the building costs. It would be site development costs. It would be infrastructure and utilities, right-of-way improvements. All of those big pieces would be included, and it will be apples to apples.
Yeah, so it'd be based on dollars per square foot.
Yes.
Okay. And taking into consideration our actual
right
that we had.
And there'll be factors based upon timing and schedule. There'll be inflationary factors tied into that.
Okay, thank you.
Just before I call on Commissioner Sorensen, I wanted to check my understanding that Commissioner Lycan is on the conference bridge. Can you hear me, Commissioner? And if so, can you respond back, please? Okay, that answers it. Commissioner Sorensen?
Thank you very much. I wanted to ask a question about the first slide too. And the blue part on that slide is the Lane County Courthouse. And there's two questions I'd like to ask on that slide. First is, what state offices are referred to under the category state offices? I thought we were working on the courthouse, the city hall, phase 1, phase 2, the city's municipal court, and the farmer's market. What is the state office component of the Lane County Courthouse?
Commissioner, in order to achieve the highest match from the state, there's a prerequisite that we have opportunities for co-location of state offices within the courthouse. And based on every kind of analysis we've done, that pencils out having a state office and then reaching 50% match from the state. So we reached out to the Department of Justice that has an office locally, as well as the Oregon Public Defense Services Commission, and they issued us letters of interest in the co-locating at the courthouse. And that number is largely based on their letters of interest. More recently, including a meeting we had at the end of the day yesterday with the director from Oregon Public Defense Services, we're refining those concepts, and I actually anticipate that as we narrow the definition of that square footage would go down, that we've afforded them in the space, but we'll continue to be a partner in our project.
Okay, and the other question is, what's the number of square feet you've allocated for the law library in the new courthouse?
I'm missing my big stack of papers. It's a lot more of an e-law library, if you will, that leverages all the advances in technology in terms of servicing folks with that function. So it's modest. If I'm recalling, it's on the order of 500 to 600 square feet with more of a terminal setup and kiosk type setup. But that's going to be a continued point of discussion as well as we refine the
Roughly a third of its current size.
Its current size was recently reduced, so maybe a little more than a third of its current size.
Okay, thank you.
Move on.
Thank you.
So this next slide begins to talk about the three development scenarios that we have been pursuing. We started out with well over a dozen of these options within the three scenarios. We've pared it down to the 6 that we are going to present to you today. But just in kind of big picture terms, Scenario A is the city maintains ownership of their lot, the county maintains ownership of the butterfly lot, the county builds the court on the butterfly lot, the city builds all of their facilities on the former city hall lot. Scenario B is that the court and the city share the large City Hall lot, and the butterfly lot and other developments might occur on the butterfly lot, with the farmer's market. And then scenario C, it's you flip ownership, the city moves to the butterfly lot and develops a city hall on that site, and the county, because of its building program and the size of the space available, moves to the city hall site. So those are the three scenarios. And we will look at 2 options for each of the scenarios. So these, and what we'll do is once we kind of go over these again, and we will refer back to these and answer questions, but this is where we'll start. These are the same scenarios that and options that I had described. So we have A1 and A2 at the top, B1 and B2 in the middle, and C1 and C2 at the bottom. And so at this point, what we'd like to do is move into a SketchUp so we can move through those spaces and actually look at each of these models individually.
So while they switch over and set up the tour of the models, I just go back to highlighting again, each of the elected bodies, the board on the 25th and the council on the 26th have an opportunity to meet independently. From a task force standpoint, we're very interested in your feedback and direction that would help us narrow A1 and A2 into an A scenario, B1 and B2 into a B scenario, and C1 and C2 into a C scenario, so that they can really maximize their productivity over the next 4 weeks in detailing out each of those to a high level of detail so the final report's as helpful as possible to you.
So scenario A looks at the courthouse on the Butterfly lot, but because it's such a large program and there is an opportunity to repurpose or reinvent portions of the current courthouse building, this scenario or this option suggests that the old court be remodeled with serving both the DA and the sheriffs with a sky bridge to a smaller courthouse footprint on the Butterfly lot. What we've shown here are the 3 green areas which identify the 3 park blocks because of the size of the courthouse, that we've eliminated any opportunity to have really a 4th park block there, or the ability to extend or reinforce Park Street to kind of bring back some of the old park, space. And then on the City Hall site, the City Hall and its form is exactly the same as what is being proposed now and in the development, and it shows a longer Phase 2 building and a location for a covered shelter, if you will, that would serve the farmers market. And within that, there would be room for 30 vendors, good access aisles, storage, and restrooms under that shelter. But it's basically not, it's a somewhat of a building, but it's really quite open. And so that's this scenario. Go to the next scenario. So this one says, and because the program for the court really wants to have the DA and the sheriffs all within the same building, close within each other, the working process of that. This shows what that building form would take if the court and the DA and the sheriffs were all in the same building. This would be the largest building in any of our modeling. It's about 1 story taller than the Citizens Building, so it would be the tallest building in downtown at this point. It's 9 stories, but you can kind of see in the model in the background, you see the Hilton. The Hilton Hotel is accurately drawn in the model, so you can kind of get a sense of the scale of that, as well as the U.S. Bank Building is another one that's accurately drawn. And then if you move to the existing court, it gets repurposed to be just county buildings or county services. And then this scenario looks at potentially keeping the City Hall on that site, the City Hall site, but putting it onto High Street. The farmers market, because of its synergy and maybe its connectivity to the Saturday market, maybe it needs to be in closer proximity to the Saturday market, and then looking at a different building scenario development for Phase 1 or Phase 2 of City Hall, looking at 2 building forms instead of just 1. So we go to the next scenario, and this is scenario B1. And this is where both the City Hall and the county would share the City Hall site. And given the size of the program for the court, this was a scenario that looked at repurposing again the old courthouse and having the DA and the sheriffs expand into that area with a sky bridge that would cross Pearl and connect the DA and the sheriffs to the court. The area south of the City Hall on the south side of 8th Street at 8th and Pearl is a open parking, city-owned parking lot right now. This scenario assumes that Phase 2 City Hall would occur on that site. And that building is about the same height as the U.S. Bank building, but it's about twice the size in terms of volume as the current U.S. Bank over on 8th and Willamette. At the Butterfly lot, because we believe it's important to enhance and strengthen the 4 park blocks and maybe bring back North Park Street, we think it's important to show a building on the north side of the Butterfly lot on 7th, so it's not just open space blowing into 7th. It helps strengthen the whole city square concept, and we've brought back the green square on the 4th block to start to get a feel about how that civic open space could be developed with the farmers market there. And we're just identifying this is not a city building or a county building. This is just a new building, mixed-use building that helps frame that space. So this scenario, no sky bridge, City Hall is in the exact same location and orientation as in its current documents. And then the court is basically 1 story taller because it doesn't have the sky bridge or the connection to the old court. So it's a much larger building volume. This option assumes that the existing court would be remodeled and maybe repurposed to become phase 2 of City Hall. But the existing court is only about 90,000 square feet, plus or minus, of available space, and the City Hall Phase 2 program is 115,000 square feet. So we're showing that second building on the north of the Butterfly Dock to help, again, strengthen the open space of the greens. And if we go to the next scenario or next option, so this is where the city and the county swap land, and the county's court and all of its functions fit on that City Hall site, and that's roughly the volume of building that would be required, that would take up a block, that entire block. This one also shows the courthouse, the existing courthouse being repurposed to be phase 2 of City Hall, as well as the City Hall moves over to the Butterfly Lot to help reinforce and strengthen the whole open greenscape and community green of the park blocks, with the farmers market in the forecourt of that. And then we're also showing the beginnings of a city campus within the park blocks area. Currently on top of the Wells Fargo building, there are 2 stories that are occupied by city services. And so we're beginning to show some of those services. So we don't have enough square footage in the court building to meet the 115,000 square feet. So this scenario or option identifies the ability to begin to think about city services spread out through a campus environment where you leave the building, go down, cross through the green, and go to another function within the city, which is all sharing that common community green. The last scenario, not much different. The court stays the same on the City Hall site. This scenario suggests that, or option suggests that City Hall or the courthouse gets demolished and a new building gets built in its place to house phase 2 City Hall functions. Potentially the City Hall on the Butterfly Lot increases in size slightly, but all of the green areas shown both on the Wells Fargo building, and then there are also some city functions on the top floor of the Parkview building across the street on Broadway and Oak. And so it's showing, again, another elaboration of that, the idea of a city campus, where there are a number of different city services and functions spread out through a number of buildings, and you walk through that community green to connect to those city services. So those are the 6 scenarios.
So we're only 4 minutes behind, so we'll turn it back over to you, Mayor and Chair, for discussion. The one point I'd highlight is that, as we face this decision point between C1, C2, B1, B2, there's aspects of these scenarios that aren't necessarily mutually exclusive, and so if there's a desire to take the best of both and meld them together, we're very open to that. It doesn't have to be a clear, we like 1 versus 2, so I'm looking forward to robust discussion on that.
Okay. Got Mike, Alan, Betty.
Just before we call in, folks, can we check the phones again and see if they're operational? Commissioner Lycan or Councilor Surratt, are you on the line?
I'm not sure. I don't think so. 5 seconds, leave me.
Okay.
I don't know if it's.
Thanks.
Before we start, my question, and I don't know the answer to it, is I'm trying to have this process not be a decision-making process so that we can go back to and have more robust discussions. So I'm trying to honor that. And then I'm trying to understand how to do that when you're narrowing down the options, or do we just want to discuss the questions and answers around narrowing down the options and actually take it back to our bodies? I want to understand before we begin the conversation.
I would say anything you can do to provide us with information that makes us be more responsive and supportive of the discussions next week, so then that decision point is facing you, that'd be helpful. So any work we can do between now and then, any additional information you need, any clarifications that we can work on between now and then so you make the decision next week would be helpful.
So I just want to be
Okay.
really clear. So you're not asking them to pick one or two from the three scenarios
Not at this
today.
point. No, we want you to consider all six, and when we meet the elected separately to review the six, then we can hopefully at that point narrow it down. Our drop dead time is again the 26th when both bodies have met and made some decisions hopefully, and that's when we can really dive into the three scenarios and then look at costs, look at scheduling, parking, all of those things, and refine these models and incorporate all of the feedback and incorporate all of those, ideas.
I think that'll be helpful to everybody. Thank
Right.
you. I've got my 4 in the queue, but I don't know if you have anybody in your.
Just have one. Go ahead.
You go first. I went first last time.
All right. Commissioner Bozovich.
I got you.
Thank you. So first question about all the diagrams is you're showing a multi-story building where a one-story building is now the court recorder's building or something. And I thought I've seen scenarios where that was going to be made open space to continue the park blocks towards the river. Is that just a filler?
No, it's not a filler. It's an actual building that will probably get built in the coming years. It's Steve Yatt is the developer there. We believe it will be a mixed-use development. It could have housing and retail on the ground floor. We've heard that it's going to be anywhere from a 5 to 6 story building. So it's going to be at the court reporter space. We're also showing the expansion of the shed in that parking lot. And then we're also showing between over in the south west corner next to the Wells Fargo Bank in that parking lot, there'll be another mixed-use building going there, office space, I believe.
Okay. It's the one that's directly across 8th from the county building.
It was catty corner from the former city hall, kind of straight across.
So then the other question I have is you're not showing any reutilization of the public service building in any of these scenarios. The second floor will be empty once City Hall Phase 1, a good portion of it, and you're showing that the courthouse isn't sufficient for City Hall Phase 2 because it's only 90,000 square feet, but if you include the second floor of the PSB, you may have all at 115 right there in the same block. So one of my comments would be is that really the mix of the PSB should be in this, and I'm kind of wondering why we were going to skybridge the courthouse to the old courthouse, but we're not going to skybridge City Hall 1 with, quote, a City Hall 2 in the courthouse. The lack of a skybridge there was a little interesting.
When it comes to the PSB, and we had this discussion with the consultant, there has been some space allocation planning that would allocate all the space that's available in the PSB once the city left. And for the purposes of this work and based on that plan, it's been more or less left alone. Sorry for lack of a better term, but if there's a desire to include that, if there's a desire to leverage that space, we can look at some of those tenants that we have slated for it otherwise.
And in regard to a sky bridge that would connect City Hall and Phase 2 City Hall, we heard from the city staff and stakeholders that the desire of having a sky bridge was not there. They really wanted to have people be able to go to the ground floor and move through the open space and connect to different facilities that way, but not necessarily connect through a sky bridge. We believe the sky bridge is really critical in terms of the function of the court and the DA and the sheriffs, but not so much for the city services.
Thank you.
Mike, you're next, and then come in. Got 4 more in the queue.
Thank you, Mayor. I appreciate your presentation and all the hard work. This seems more of, at this stage, the aesthetic look of what each of these scenarios would present. Obviously, the final decisions are going to be made on a number of other factors for the public's sake that include cost and all of the other issues that are going to be a part of the decision. For my part, I must say that on a purely aesthetic basis, if I had to choose one of these and had no other choices available to me, I like the look of C1. That's just my personal opinion. 2 things. Number one, as Alan mentioned, I would have liked to have seen in the aesthetic layouts of each of the scenarios where parking would go and how much of it would be required. The reason is because I don't think that's an insignificant consideration based on each of the options. Do you have anything you can show us or tell us right now with regard to how much geography we're talking about? Because with the butterfly lot and other parking that we use for both city and county right now, it's a really good chunk of real estate. So where's it going to go? And then I have some other questions here.
Did you want to? What I was going to say is that we have had lots of conversation around parking and understand that is a very big issue in terms of decision making. And so what we've been working on and talking about is how we should map the parking so that you can see the overlay. And so our intent is to bring something back that gives you more descriptive information and actually helps you understand the proximity to the arrangement of the facilities. And so we're working on that, but it's not done.
Will that show just employee parking, or will it show employee and public parking?
I think the intent is to show the volume of parking that's available for both.
It would be helpful to me to see that distributed for each, because I know we're going to need at least, what, 200 or 300 parking places for employees, and then for public. I don't know what the planning is from the subcommittee, but I'd be very interested in seeing that both geospatially and as a coordinated color on each in terms of the thinking. The other piece is, I can't tell from here, and I don't know from the subcommittee discussions, have you talked about at least the possibility of us considering the municipal court within any of those courtroom scenarios? I like the idea of the Muni Court, for example, being in the C1, but I don't know what the effect would be on that building kind of, area spacing.
The square footage for the municipal court, which is about 20,000 square feet, is included in the volumes of the Phase 2 City Hall piece. We originally had it colored as a different color so you could identify where it was, but we hadn't completed our interview with the municipal judge, so we didn't really get that refined, but we felt like it was really a part of the Phase 2 development. But the volume that you're seeing in buildings incorporates municipal court in all those scenarios. In fact, there is still discussion of whether the municipal court wants to be in the county court, and so we've looked at scenarios with that as well.
But what I'm hearing you say is it's a part of the City Hall spacing we're seeing there, and not a part of the courthouse spacing in blue that we're seeing there. Is that correct?
It's in both of these volumes in certain scenarios or certain options. What we need to probably do is get more direction from both elected bodies to tell us where they would like to see municipal court housed.
And they did have, Cameron McCarthy did have a stakeholder meeting with Judge Allen and talked about the co-location and having a joint justice facility. And I think that one of the interests is also maintaining the level of autonomy that both of the courts need. And so trying to work within the different iterations and possibilities.
my thinking on it is that as I look at the C scenarios here, that would necessitate the city selling or trading or making an agreement with the county or the state for the entirety of that block that we currently own. So in order to have maybe some consideration with our agreement with the county, one of the factors might be the value of, as long as they're building something, adding building space for the municipal court, which might make it more affordable for both. That was why I was asking. Thank you.
Commissioner Sorensen?
I just wanted to ask if you have any financial estimates on any of them, or have you put any dollars on any of the 6?
We have not. That gets back to, we're eager to start that work, but we're wanting to do it for 3 scenarios and not 6, so we manage our scope here. But we've got those resources to bear, and we'll apply them accordingly.
Hey, Alan?
So it still sounds like what you're asking us to do on the 25th and 26th is to choose between 1 and 2s. And a big, huge part of that is going to be the cost aspect of each. Are we supposed to assume that between 1 and 2, the costs don't make any difference? Because I can't see that that's true. And so for me to weigh between options 1 and option 2 for A, B, and C, I need to know that because it's such a big part of this. The aesthetics are and the massings are important, but it's not going to be outweighed by the cost. So how do we get to be able to choose between 1 and 2 without knowing anything about cost?
Okay. I'd say that's great feedback in preparation for your meeting next week, and we can certainly work to try to address that on some level of detail to get you the information you need.
I mean, if you're going to do, dollars per square foot, then ostensibly they're all the same cost, and that doesn't make sense to me.
Well, yeah, and they aren't all the same cost. If you looked at scenario C and you have the court, it doesn't change between 1 and 2 there. So that cost is going to be constant irregardless. And it's really looking at, for scenario C, do you remodel the current courthouse building, or do you tear it down and build a new building for Phase 2 City Hall? So those are the real costs associated with scenario C. In terms of the City Hall, that really doesn't change, other than we might think about the square footage for Phase 2 a little bit differently, based upon what Jay Bozovich said about the utilizing some of the current city functions in the public service building. But so we're really close on probably C. The ones that are probably a little bit more complex to figure out are the B options, because those really, I mean, the A option particularly with City Hall on the City Hall lot and the Phase 2, that's really not anything different than where we are right now with the City Hall project. I mean, they'd always figured that potentially City Hall would be, Phase 2 would be on the north side of that building. And so the costs that are associated that are being value engineered and determining what the real buildable costs are for the A scenario with the City Hall on the City Hall lot, nothing's really changed there as well. We know, so there are pieces that we're getting really close to kind of saying, well, those don't really change from 1 to 2. But again, there will be some infrastructure components. There will be some utilities that might be affected. We want to make sure that we're as thorough as possible on the site development before we kind of plow into or dive into the costs. So making the decision about which is the best location for the building is the primary thing that we need to focus on. Then we can dive into those other things and certainly try and supply you with as much information as you can to make as best an informed decision as possible next week.
Yeah, I'll just reiterate what Mike said, and parking is really an important part of this, and having a sense of how the parking works when we talk about the different scenarios is critically important. And if you're just talking about the 228 spaces at the Butterfly lot, that's $5 to $7 million to replace that structure. So that's a significant amount of money. It's also where the heck are you going to do it? And two other questions that for the 26th that we don't have to go into now is why in A2 would phase 2 be 2 buildings? That seems like more cost than 1 building. And then in C, the C1 and 2, the Wells Fargo building, that would assume we would buy the whole building and that it's for sale, or and what about in C2, the little annex building? How does that work? And then in C2, you're adding a whole nother floor. Is that like what we did before, which is to say shell out the 5th floor or something like that? Those are questions for the 26th.
Betty?
Thank you. My first question was about the same thing that Jay asked, I think. What about a bridge across? If we choose, C1 would be City Hall on one side and Phase 2 on the other side, maybe.
Correct.
And you have discarded the idea of a bridge?
Well, I mean, we were given direction that the real desire was to really get people to move on the ground plane and move through the green, if you will, more as a campus setting instead of having kind of these sky bridge connections. We understand the critical nature of having a sky bridge connecting the DA with the court, but we were directed that not to really consider a sky bridge for city.
I don't know where that direction came from, but I think it's important for the city offices to be connected. And I think a crucial thing in relation to what Alan was talking about, cost, is we need to know whether the county is going to give us the county courthouse and if we give them City Hall site. The Butterfly lot is not equivalent to the old City Hall site. And we need to discuss whether the trade would include the county courthouse for Phase 2. And I like Jay's suggestion of using the space that the city's now using as a part of it. And if we could get City Hall spread out in no more than 2 places with the Sky Bridge connecting, it would go back to what was our goal a long time ago, to have all the city offices together for the benefit of the public, as well as the benefit of city employees. But C1, I think, looks good, provided that we get economically get a fair trade. Thank you.
George, you don't know. Around?
Thank you, Mayor. Thanks for the presentation. I know that I did not get the schematic drawing in my packet. Anyone else? Okay, well, it'd really be great if we could get those in our packet tomorrow, because it's just fascinating, and you just need more time to, look at it. And
We were admittedly modifying this morning, so
I'll
in your
bet you
packet
were.
went out.
Yeah,
So
no, I understand.
right after this, we could get that right to you. You bet.
Yeah, I figured that was probably the reason. You're on a really
Right.
so far.
We're only asking
Great.
to move.
But and the only other, so yeah, if we could see
Absolutely.
preferably color copies like these, and you just want to enter at the parking, of course, is key, or where that, and it would be neat if we could see a modified thing of where they might go, and I know where some of them might go, but it would be helpful to see in all the scenarios, and I do think that you should. As Commissioner Bozievich suggested, look at adding on maybe city functions here in the public service building. I think that's an interesting idea. Add that option in, because maybe if we did that and had the old courthouse and had Phase 1 across the street, maybe that would be a sufficient square footage. I don't know for the city's needs. So it'd be nice to have that too. Thank you.
Chris, you're up.
Thank you. Yeah, I mean, if you look at this historically, the original plan was A1. That was kind of where everything kind of started, was with the notion of an A1. And the farmer's market, as you see, located there was kind of what created a lot of the conversation around, well, we might want to look at something different. And it rolled from there. And I think that's all fine, but a lot of these scenarios are built around the expectation of where the farmer's market will wind up. And so, the 12,000 square foot part of this conversation is to some degree heavily influencing where 200, 300,000 square feet of other buildings are being built. I'm not saying that's good or bad, but it's interesting that that's what's causing a lot of this conversation, in addition to the relationship between the county and the city. When I look at an exercise like this, where it's basically green, blue, and yellow and purple Legos, and where we put the Legos, and they can be put in any different combinations. This was just the best combinations for these scenarios, but for me, the costing information, which I think is critical to where these Legos wind up, and I think the size of the Lego, the location of the Lego, and the condition of the Lego really dictate what that cost is. And by condition, I mean, is it a new Lego or am I refurbishing an old Lego? Am I cleaning it up and dusting it off? And in some cases, trying to clean up an old Lego is more expensive than just building a new Lego. And so I think we need to take that into consideration, because when we talk about the current courthouse building, refurbishing that building, I think that's a real question about what is the cost of doing that, depending on the use. And I know I've heard if it's reused for uses consistent with what it's being used for now, it might be an easy Lego to fix. But if you're trying to refurbish that Lego for a very different use, it may be actually very expensive. So that has a great influence on a number of those scenarios there. When I look at A1 and A2, one of the principal differences, apart from two buildings versus one, which is really, that's easy to fix, but it's the location, once again, of the farmer's market. And I know the farmer's market would not be happy, really, with the idea of being all the way over on the east side of the City Hall block. That's way far away from where they are. And so by moving it over to the other side, it suits a lot of their needs. It moves it closer, but now the City Hall is on the other side, which is also kind of far away from the rest of the government functions going on. In scenario B1, you have a building on the southeast corner of 8th and Pearl. You could also put the farmer's market on the southeast corner of 8th and Pearl. That might be a possibility as well. It gets it a block over, it moves it further over, and doesn't have to change the cost, the configuration, or the kind of Legos that we're moving around. So it's just at least something to consider. This is what I mean in terms of we have flexibility to start playing with the Legos within these scenarios, but as others have said, I need to know what each Lego's basic cost is based on its location, its size, and what condition it's in.
I guess my only comment would be that it seems like one important thing you can do more easily at the beginning of the deliberation part around this is are there any of these that you just hate? So take them off the table and don't and that would be a council decision, but I'm just saying one of the things that maybe will come up in our next meeting is, are there some of these that are just losers for us to start out with, and you can get those off the table to start with. So that's just something for you all to consider. Alan and then Betty. Oh, you passed? Okay. Betty?
Thank you. I think we should take moving the farmer's market off the table. I think the farmers want to stay where they are. The public likes it there. Also, it's easily accessible for both the Overpark and the Parkade, and people use both of those to go to the farmers market. And it's a traditional place where it is, and very successful where it is.
I bet we'll have that discussion at our next meeting.
Thank you.
So I remembered my question.
Okay, what did you?
It was related to what Betty was talking about with regard to the equity of costs associated with all these scenarios, and for the city to entertain moving City Hall means additional costs for a whole bunch of different things, potentially parking, redesigning the building, and things like that. You can't just pick up our existing design and move it. That would cost potentially millions of dollars. So the equity of all that associated with that, how does the courthouse compensate the city for doing that? How does the land parcels and the building swaps and all the things and remodeling costs, all that gets very complicated in terms of the value of each of these Lego pieces and the properties that they're on. So that's also part of the conversation, and we really haven't captured yet, and how to keep the city whole, and how to keep the cost of all of this infrastructure, public infrastructure, at a minimum, which is what we want to try to do.
Yes, I got to Commissioner Bozievich.
So the question was, with this, any of those you'd throw out, I'd throw out A2 because I can't see where we would ever have 90,000 square feet of additional need for floor space in downtown for the county.
Mike again.
Thank you, Mayor. What's interesting to me in this part of the process is the discussion, just from the city's perspective, not the county considerations, but just from the city's perspective, are my colleagues' comments around cost. I agree with them. And I would suggest what we're going to get to, if not at the next meeting where we begin, at the council's next meeting, where we begin to refine the decisioning here, and as we get closer to decisions about how to proceed, it occurs to me that we may want to revisit values and assign at least some manner of priority to those values as a group. From my perspective, this process would be easier amongst council to say, okay, does, cost per square foot, or does, what parts of the consideration seem to be more important than other parts of the consideration, relatively speaking. The layout is the only part we're seeing today, but the costs are going to be important, and where does the parking go? So our ability to analyze those different values on a priority scale, I think, may help us when we get to the grid of what do each of these options present us. It's just an idea for the team that's going to be working with us. Thank you.
Mayor, could I get in the queue?
Sure.
Okay. Commissioner Sorensen?
I wanted to ask a question about the Wayne Morse Free Speech Plaza. Which one of the scenarios maintains the Wayne Morse Free Speech Plaza the way it is presently? All of them. All of them.
They all do.
Okay, thank you.
Claire?
Yeah, thanks. I appreciated Councilor Clark's recommendation there, and I was going to request that for the city council follow-up discussion on this, if we could have the original set of values that we scoped out the city hall with as part of the conversation, and a template included. They don't necessarily have to be applied to these scenarios. We can apply them ourselves, but that would be very helpful to the discussion.
Thanks, Claire.
Commissioner Farr?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I understand Councilor Pryor's analogy using Legos, because when I came to America about 50 years ago, the only thing I had was a set of Legos and the clothes I was wearing. So I understand moving Lego blocks around. But that's the point I wanted to make. The discussion that we had during the smaller group meetings was looking at these scenarios just like they are blocks, building blocks, and they can be interchanged between the 6 different scenarios. So we don't have 6 scenarios, really. We can take a look at how to move things in between the scenarios. The massing is the important is what I took away from the meetings as the important element. That and that's the discussion that you can have as a city council, and we can have as a board of directors, is how we mass those building blocks. And that's I really appreciated when you 3 weeks ago you first started talking about that, Larry. That the massing is kind of interchangeable, and that's something that we can consider in between the various scenarios that we're looking at. So, my Lego blocks were red and white, though they weren't blue and green and purple.
If I might add, Commissioner Lycan, do you have any comments or questions at this point? All right, maybe he's on mute.
Sorry about that, I was on mute. So, no questions or comments. Thank you.
Thanks.
Okay, so I think we're,
May I make one more comment, or just, I want to emphasize considerations and prerequisites, that you really examine those, because it's really not, I mean, we are looking for the best place for each of the buildings in the scenario, but in the bigger picture, we want to have everybody consider how do those buildings relate to one another in their particular uses, and if there are any conflicts of adjacency because of the, say, if, as an example, if you have the court and City Hall on the same lot, we do know that the court has some concerns about the public square or plaza that might be associated with City Hall in terms of security and access for the court functions. So those are identified in those considerations. What also is identified is that the bigger goal, or hopefully the bigger vision, is this is really an opportunity for a legacy project for this community. And if we think about connecting 8th Avenue as a great street, and that there are pearls, or it's really a necklace of important open spaces that connect us from Willamette to the Willamette River. Consider the organization of those buildings, and how do those help inform or enhance or expand the ability to celebrate civic pride and community connectivity and those kinds of things. So it's not just thinking about, you know, how big the building is and where it fits, but how does it reinforce some of those bigger ideals?
in our particular case, at our last council meeting, we had a presentation on placemaking and the observation that we needed to take into account what we're trying to do in terms of placemaking with this discussion about the buildings and where they would be and how they should be. So it's kind of trying to put those two things together in a thoughtful way. Hey, Councilor Evans.
So with any of these scenarios, as we look at phase 1 and phase 2 of City Hall, what is the full percentage of city offices that are going to be brought back into any of these configurations that we're seeing? Are we talking about, 75% of city offices, city services, 90%, 50%? With phase 1 and phase 2, what are we actually talking about? Because my orientation is more in terms of, what is the function, not so much the form. And so I'm looking at, if we're talking to city residents, what are they going to get out of this in terms of being able to engage city services in a more comprehensive way, us getting out of leases all over town and getting the biggest bang for the buck? That's the legacy I'm looking at. That's what people are talking to me about.
Councilor Evans will bring back that information next week. I don't have that percentage in the top of my head, but we'll bring it back next week when we have that conversation.
Yeah, because what I was just talking with a prominent business person and leader yesterday for an hour and a half, and one of his concerns was around this project is, are we bringing municipal court back into the downtown core? Are we going to bring back other city offices and services into the core? And is that going to be part of a city hall complex that will eventually be functional in a more comprehensive and cohesive way?
Is there anything else left on the other than the
that's it.
public hearing part? Okay.
The accounting firm of Ernst & Young is bringing up an envelope.
Okay, so we have 5 folks that have signed up, and might ask that they come to the table here, and Mike, I call your name, And we'll give you 3 minutes to speak. And the first one is Angela Norman.
Hi, everyone. Good to see you all again. I'm Angela Norman. I'm the market director at the Lane County Farmers Market. We applaud the City of Eugene and Lane County for your commitment to revisioning downtown. The Lane County Farmers Market is honored to be one of the vital civic spaces of our community, located in the heart of downtown Eugene and the county. We look forward to growing the market to create a space that honors our community's local farm-to-table food culture. The farmers market is in support of the options that would allow us to stay at the corner of 8th and Oak. These options provide the space needed to expand with our seasons, allow room for growth for our membership, and honor the deeply rooted connection to this site where the area's first producers market began over 100 years ago. Also, the synergy between LCFM and Eugene Saturday Market creates significant economic activity. On a busy Saturday, we see over 10,000 people. Visitors spend their dollars locally at both markets and spread the wealth to other businesses throughout the downtown area. These dollars are critical to sustaining our small local businesses. For these reasons, the Lane County Farmers Market requests that you strongly consider options that would allow the farmers market to remain at our current site location. And we are excited by the momentum around creating a more vibrant downtown and look forward to continuing to be active partners in this process. Thank you.
Thank you. Next is Linda, is it Perrine? Thanks.
Hi, I'm Linda Perrine. I'm the owner of Honor Earth Farm, which is one of the members of the Farmers Market. Our farm has been a member for the last 6 years and currently has a booth on 8th Street. I'd like to thank both Lane County and the City of Eugene for supporting the farmers market and for carefully considering where to locate an expanded market site. Since I began selling at the farmers market, I've seen firsthand the lack of space and sorely needed improvements at the site. Customers often are troubled by how crowded and difficult it is to move around the market, especially during the peak hours of 11 to 1 o'clock. During the cold and rainy months, businesses hurt since there is little covered space for visitors to browse and spend their money. An expanded and improved farmers market site would support our community's values around local food, farms and food. We really appreciate the urban renewal funds for an improved market site and for the continued support of both the county and the city. I urge you to please keep the farmers market at 8th and Oak, so that we can continue to grow the market where it took root over 100 years ago. Thank you.
Thank you. Next, Lonnie McCulloch.
And before you do that, I'm going to have to excuse myself. So to get to another meeting, so I'm going to give this to Councilor Evans to close out.
Yeah, my name is Lonnie McCulloch. I live in the 1300 block of Charleston Street. And first I would like to say that in regard to the butterfly parking lot, I think that even if you get the ruling that you want, you should not use it. I think that it would cost you credibility, and credibility is something that no public governing body can afford to lose. And so, you know, all these options, honestly, I couldn't keep track of them all in my head. I'd like to present a brand new and very long and very large one that there's no way you can accomplish in the timeline you want. I acknowledge that. But I would like to see both city functions and county functions at the current Lane County Fairgrounds. Obviously, you would have to move the fairgrounds, but then you could have all city functions and all county functions in the same site. If a person wanted to get a city building permit and it turned out they needed a county building permit, they wouldn't have to go somewhere else. I think there would be plenty of room for City Hall, City Municipal Court, the county courthouse for the most part, LCOG, LRAPA, County Extension, all these kinds of things at the county fairgrounds, which would be easily accessible. And there would still be plenty of room in the back to develop a healthy riparian area along Amazon Creek, which would go a long ways towards restoring Amazon Creek. If you could have Amazon Creek come out of the channelized section and into a healthy riparian area, I think it would be a significant step restoring Amazon Creek. Thank you.
Thank you. Next, Jan Smith.
Hi, I'm Jan Smith, and I live in South Eugene. In the Register Guard newspaper during September and October, approximately 18 articles, guest editorials, and letters to the editor have been published relating to homelessness. Many have addressed problems associated with being homeless. Others have suggested possible solutions and future plans. Several have commented on better use of existing funds. For example, the $18 million that is set aside for a new City Hall building. People have been interested in City Hall using existing buildings becoming available, such as eWeb. 22 tiny houses are planned for Emerald Village. 14 units are planned for youth at former Cascade Presbyterian Church on Willamette. The City of Portland has committed to build 400 housing units, and $21.5 million has been pledged from 5 major hospitals and 1 nonprofit health care plan. Mother Teresa said it is a kindly act to assist the fallen. Phil Knight has just donated $500 million to benefit the future of science in our community and at the U of O. He will be remembered for his acts to benefit the future. I challenge you to be remembered for what you do as a governing body to benefit the needs of and homeless citizens of Eugene and Lane County. Do you want to be remembered for a new City Hall providing for the neediest citizens of Eugene? Thank you.
Thank you. Next, Mike McFadden.
Hello, I'm Mike McFadden from Eugene. And to begin, I'd just like to reiterate or underscore the tremendous economic benefits that the Lane County Farmers Market brings to the entire county and to the downtown core. And there's just an amazing opportunity for that to grow and continue should a facility be made available for the member farmers to sell their produce and items year-round to the public. I know personally, me and a lot of other young farmers look forward to joining that economic activity and growing it in the future. And I don't think it's really productive to speak of the farmers market as just another Lego that can be lifted up and put down and set here or there. It's really not that simple. And there's a lot of things that are really counterproductive on some of these scenarios. Putting the farmers market kitty quarter to the new Whole Foods would really not be productive. I think it's really interesting that, the previous speaker just mentioned the eWeb headquarters, which I didn't hear talked about today. I do understand that there are some who feel that because it's not centrally located in the downtown core, that might not be a great option. But in light of the $500 million gift that Phil and Penny Knight have pledged, and the new plans for development going along that riverfront corridor, along with the 17-acre eWeb property itself, that area does represent a tremendous opportunity to develop a new city hall and a new riverfront corridor. My preference would be for the farmers market to remain at 8th and Oak and to be expanded so that economic development I mentioned could take place. I really think that, when we're talking about all of these things, the buildings that would be constructed would definitely provide jobs in terms of, the workers who are building them. But in the long term, the farmers market is the biggest economic engine of these factors, providing, economic benefits in the longest term. So I think it's important that we value the farmers market and hold it as a high priority in these discussions. And just lastly, I'd like to just, as an aside, make a point that public demonstrations or, public plazas near to a courthouse. Sad to say to the court, but the court should just accept the fact that people have the constitutional right to protest outside of the court in a square. So the court may not be very happy about that, but that's just how it is. Thank you.
Okay. That was the last individual that had signed up. Is there anyone that would like to speak that didn't get a chance to sign up? Mr. Cassidy, welcome.
Thank you, Bob Cassidy. I would like to speak as a citizen of Eugene about the county building. It seems to me that what we would really like to see for over 50 years is a building that really adds to the charm of the city, even though it is a county building. I think the entire block should be delegated to the county so that they can put up a building that we would all really be proud of. I think they can do a much better job of that if they have the sufficient space and not look like it was something crammed into the corner. Thank you.
Thank you. All right. I believe that concludes the public comment.
There's one more.
Excuse me. Is there one more that'd like to speak? Yes, please come forward.
Yes, my name is Lee Sutton, and I do have some background in city planning and architecture. And one comment I had after listening to all of this, one of the things that I think you should be considering when you evaluate these different plans is the future in terms of what each of those plans may lock you into a certain area without much room for expansion for the future, and none of us can figure out what that's going to need to be. But if there's one of the, that should be maybe not the most important criteria, but at least one of the criteria to evaluate if a particular plan allows further expansion for the county facilities and or the city facilities. And I think, to be honest, that the other thing I was going to comment on, if we can consolidate as much of the city functions into a single building as possible, I think that's better for everyone in terms of cost and as well as functionality. Unless there may be some functions, like I'm not sure how much the court and the other city functions necessarily have in common, but that's something that needs to be figured out in the plan, obviously, that you're working on. So, thank you.
Thank you. And anyone else? Okay, this time we'll conclude public comment. Is there any other business before us today? For last comments? Okay, so with that, I'll adjourn the Lane County Board of Commissioners.
And I'll adjourn the meeting of the City Council.